The guard never saw it coming. It happened inside the cold concrete walls of United States Penitentiary Marion, a prison built to hold the most dangerous men in America. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. In just seconds, the silence exploded into chaos. An inmate lunged forward, holding a sharpened homemade knife. Another followed. The first guard fell. The second guard tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. By the time help arrived, both men were dead. The killers were members of the Aryan Brotherhood, a white supremacist prison gang driven by hate and control. The murders shocked the nation. 2 trained correctional officers killed inside a maximum security prison, not during a riot, not during a mass escape, but in a planned and cold-blooded attack. The prison went into full lockdown. Doors slammed shut, sirens screamed, and America was forced to face a terrifying question. How did a neo-Nazi gang become powerful enough to kill guards inside one of the most secure prisons in the country? And this was only the beginning. To understand how it reached this point, we have to go back in time, long before the blood stained the floors of Marion, long before the Aryan Brotherhood became a name whispered in fear by inmates and guards alike. The Aryan Brotherhood was born inside California prisons in the late 1960s. At first, it was small, just a group of white inmates who claimed they needed protection. Prisons were tense and divided by race. Gangs formed along racial lines, and violence was common. The Brotherhood said it existed to defend white prisoners from attacks. But protection quickly turned into power. The group adopted Nazi symbols, white supremacist beliefs, and a strict code. Members swore loyalty for life. There was no quitting, no walking away. Orders were followed without question. Disobedience meant death. Soon, the Aryan Brotherhood was no longer reacting to violence, it was creating it. Inside prisons, the gang controlled drug dealing, extortion, and murder. They decided who lived and who died. If an inmate refused to cooperate, they were stabbed. If a guard challenged them, they were threatened. Fear became their strongest weapon. By the 1970s, the Aryan Brotherhood had spread beyond California. Federal prisons, including Marion, began to see their influence grow. Members were transferred from prison to prison, and with them, their ideology followed. Hate was taught like a lesson. New recruits were chosen carefully, often targeting weak or scared inmates who wanted protection. The gang's leaders believed violence was necessary. They believed terror kept them strong. Marion Prison itself was already known as a harsh place. It held inmates considered too dangerous for normal prisons. The conditions were strict, tensions were high, guards were always alert. But even here, the Aryan Brotherhood found ways to operate. They passed messages through coded notes. They made weapons from scraps of metal. They watched guards closely, learning their routines. Everything was planned slowly and quietly. Then came October 1983. On that day, 2 guards were targeted and killed in separate attacks. These were not random acts. They were ordered killings, meant to send a message. The message was clear. The Aryan Brotherhood was not afraid of the system. They believed they could strike anyone, anywhere. The impact was immediate. The prison went into permanent lockdown. Inmates were confined to their cells almost 23 hours a day, every day. Marion became the model for what would later be called supermax prisons. But the damage was already done. The murders showed how extremist hate could grow behind bars, feeding on fear, anger, and isolation. The Aryan Brotherhood was no longer just a prison gang. It had become a domestic extremist force, using terror to control its world. For guards across the country, the fear was real. If it could happen at Marion, it could happen anywhere. And as investigators dug deeper, they began to uncover something even more disturbing. The violence was not stopping. Orders were still being passed. Targets were still being named. The prison was locked down, but the Brotherhood was far from locked away. And what they planned next would prove that walls and bars were not enough to stop hate once it had taken root. The doors slammed shut again. Inside Marion Prison, the lockdown that followed the murders never truly ended. Inmates stayed inside their cells for almost 23 hours a day, every day. Guards walked the halls in pairs. Every sound echoed louder than before. But even with the prison sealed tight, fear still lived inside the walls. The Aryan Brotherhood had proven something terrifying. They could kill guards, and they were not finished.
Investigators soon realized the murders were not acts of rage, they were orders, messages sent from the top of the Aryan Brotherhood chain. Inside this gang, leaders gave commands the same way generals do in war. When an order was given, someone carried it out. No questions, no hesitation. The killings at Marion were meant to punish the prison system. They were revenge for earlier crackdowns on the gang. The Brotherhood believed the guards had disrespected them. In their twisted belief system, violence was the answer. What shocked officials most was how disciplined the gang was. Members did not talk, they did not panic. Even when facing life sentences or death row, they stayed silent. Loyalty came before everything, even life itself. As weeks passed, federal authorities began digging deeper into the Aryan Brotherhood's past. What they found was darker than anyone expected. By the early 1980s, the gang had become one of the most violent forces inside U.S. prisons. They were responsible for dozens of murders across multiple states. Many of the victims were inmates, some were informants, others were killed simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The gang's beliefs were simple and dangerous: white supremacy, neo-Nazi ideology, absolute control through fear. Members wore tattoos with Nazi symbols, lightning bolts, and the letters AB. These marks were not decoration, they were warnings. The Aryan Brotherhood also worked with other criminal groups when it benefited them. Drugs were a major source of power. Heroin and meth moved through prison systems under their control. Money flowed in from outside connections. Violence protected the business. Inside Marion, guards tried to break the gang's influence by separating members, but the Brotherhood had planned for this. Even in isolation, they communicated using coded messages and trusted messengers. A single word passed at the right time could mean death for someone else. One guard later said it felt like fighting an invisible enemy. Then, another incident raised alarms. Just months after the Marion murders, intelligence reports warned of more planned attacks. Targets included rival inmates, witnesses, and possibly more guards. The threat level was high. Every movement inside the prison felt dangerous. A dropped tray, a sudden noise, a door opening too fast. Fear controlled both sides of the bars. Outside the prison, the story began to spread. The public learned that the Aryan Brotherhood was not just a gang of angry prisoners. It was an organized extremist group that used terror tactics to rule its environment. Lawmakers demanded answers. How could this happen inside federal custody? The answer was hard to accept. Prison did not destroy the gang. It helped create it. Isolation, racial tension, and constant violence created the perfect conditions. The Aryan Brotherhood gave its members identity, protection, and purpose. For many inmates, joining meant survival. Leaving meant death. By the mid-1980s, the federal government launched major cases against the gang's leadership. Prosecutors used racketeering laws to charge top members with ordering murders they never personally committed. Trials revealed chilling details: leaders approving hits from prison cells, kill lists written by hand, initiation rituals that demanded blood. Some members testified, most did not.
Those who spoke out paid a heavy price. Retaliation was swift and brutal. The Brotherhood made sure everyone understood the cost of betrayal. Despite life sentences and death penalties, the gang survived. New leaders rose, new recruits filled the ranks. Hate was passed down like a rule book. Marion Prison remained locked down, becoming a symbol of failure and fear. It inspired the creation of supermax prisons like ADX Florence, built to isolate the most dangerous inmates in the country. But even then, the Aryan Brotherhood adapted. Their reach extended beyond prison walls. Members on the outside carried out crimes on behalf of leaders inside. Drug deals, murders, intimidation. The line between prison and street disappeared. Hate traveled freely. And then, during one federal investigation, authorities uncovered something that sent chills through the justice system. A list. Names of future targets, guards, inmates, witnesses. Each name meant a possible death sentence. The Aryan Brotherhood was not just surviving under pressure, it was planning again. Even after lockdowns, isolation, and life sentences, the gang was still reaching for control. Inside the prisons, tension rose to a breaking point. Guards knew the danger. Every shift felt like walking into a trap. Simple tasks became life-threatening, handing out food, opening cell doors, escorting inmates down narrow hallways. One mistake could be fatal. The memory of Marion never faded. Everyone remembered how fast violence could strike. The Brotherhood's power came from fear, but also from patience. They waited, they watched, they tested the system. When pressure increased, they slowed down. When attention moved elsewhere, they struck. This made them hard to stop. Unlike random violence, their attacks were calm and planned. Federal prosecutors knew they needed a different approach. Instead of chasing individual murders, they went after the structure. Using racketeering laws, they charged the gang's leaders with crimes committed by others. Ordering a murder was treated the same as committing it. This strategy hit the Brotherhood where it hurt most. Courtrooms filled with shocking testimony. Former members described a world ruled by hate. Initiation required violence. Orders were passed like commands in an army. Racism was not just belief, it was law. Members were told who to hate, who to kill, and when to act. Some leaders were sentenced to life in prison. Others received the death penalty. On paper, it looked like a victory. But inside prison walls, the story was not over. The Aryan Brotherhood changed tactics. Instead of large groups, they used small cells. Instead of loud attacks, they used quiet pressure, threats, extortion, silent stabbings in hidden corners, violence that left no witnesses. Even young inmates began showing up with Aryan Brotherhood tattoos. Hate was still spreading. Prison officials tried education programs and separation units, but undoing years of fear was not easy. For many inmates, joining the gang still felt safer than standing alone. The Brotherhood offered protection, even if it came with a deadly price. Outside the prisons, the gang's influence reached the streets. Members who were released carried orders with them. Crimes committed on the outside still served leaders locked inside. The bars did not stop the chain of command. This blurred line scared law enforcement. The Aryan Brotherhood was no longer just a prison gang. It was a domestic extremist network using terror to control people, both inside and outside prison walls. Their goal was not politics, it was power through fear. Over time, stronger controls weakened the gang. Supermax prisons isolated key leaders. Communication was limited. Some members left the life, aging out or choosing survival over hate. Violence slowly decreased, but it never fully disappeared.
The Aryan Brotherhood still exists, though smaller and fractured. Its history remains a warning. Prisons can hold bodies, but they do not automatically change minds. Hate can grow in dark places if left unchecked. The murders at Marion changed the U.S. prison system forever. They led to extreme security measures and reshaped how dangerous inmates are handled. But they also showed a painful truth. Extremism does not always come from outside enemies. Sometimes it grows quietly behind bars. And as long as fear, anger, and isolation exist, the risk remains that another group, driven by hate, will rise to take its place. The doors may be locked, but the danger is never fully gone. The silence inside the prison was heavy. Years after the murders at Marion, the halls were still quiet, but not peaceful. Guards walked slowly, watching every corner. Cameras followed every step. Doors opened only when necessary. The system had changed forever, but fear still lingered. Everyone remembered what the Aryan Brotherhood had done. The gang was weaker now, but it was not gone. Federal supermax prisons like ADX Florence were built to stop groups like the Aryan Brotherhood from controlling others. The most dangerous leaders were locked alone in concrete cells for up to 23 hours a day. No contact, no influence, no followers nearby. It worked, but at a cost. Some inmates went silent, others grew angrier. Former members later said the Brotherhood survived because it adapted. When violence brought too much attention, they slowed down. When leaders were isolated, others quietly stepped up. Hate did not need loud orders anymore. It lived in looks, symbols, and whispered promises of protection. Inside prisons across America, officers were trained to spot the signs. Tattoos, hand signals, certain words. But stopping ideas was harder than stopping weapons. The Aryan Brotherhood's legacy lived on in broken lives. Families of murdered inmates never got justice. Guards who survived attacks carried trauma for years. Some quit, some stayed, but never felt safe again. The prison system paid a high price for learning too late how dangerous extremist gangs could become. Experts later said the warning signs were always there: racial division, overcrowding, isolation, fear. These were the tools that helped the Brotherhood grow. When people feel powerless, hate can feel like strength. When survival is the goal, ideology can become a weapon. The murders at Marion were meant to send a message, and they did. They showed that extremist violence does not always wear masks or carry bombs. Sometimes it wears prison uniforms. Sometimes it waits patiently behind locked doors. Today, the Aryan Brotherhood is smaller, split into factions, watched closely by law enforcement. But new extremist prison gangs have appeared over time, learning from the same playbook: control through fear, loyalty through violence, silence through terror. The lesson is clear. Prisons can punish crime, but without careful control, they can also become breeding grounds for extremism. When hate is ignored, it grows. When fear rules, violence follows. The story of the Aryan Brotherhood is not just about the past, it is a warning for the future. Because somewhere, right now, behind steel doors and concrete walls, anger is building. And if the system looks away again, history could repeat itself. The question is not whether another group like this could rise. The question is whether we will see it coming next time.
If hate can grow in the most controlled places on Earth, what does that say about the world outside the walls? And how many warning signs are we still missing today?